Hi everyone! Today I'm going to be doing my top books of 2015, which is one that has been doing the rounds on BookTube because it's such an obvious topic, like why wouldn't you make a video about this? And I have quite a lot of top books. I was going to try and limit it to my top 10, but then I thought top 10 is like such an arbitrary number, like why would I try and limit myself to 10 when there's so many books that I loved that deserve a mention as well. So here I am today presenting my top 12 books of 2015. The first one I'm going to talk about is a poetry collection. Now I don't read an awful lot of poetry, I love it, but I don't know, I just never really get around to reading poetry. I think it's just, I feel like I've exhausted the poets that I like and I just don't know where to start with finding new ones. So I decided to pick up an anthology in the summer, which I absolutely adored, hence why it's on this list obviously. And it is called Hallelujah for 50-Foot Women, Poems about women's relationships with their bodies, and it is poems edited and collected by the Raving Beauties, who I do believe are an all-female American poetry collective. They allowed people to submit poems to them to be used in this book. So it's got some established poets, and then it's also got a lot of brand new poets who have never been published before, and I thought that was really nice. Not only is it a fascinating subject matter and something that's really important and widely discussed today, but it's also helping get the voices out of these female poets who might not be heard otherwise. I've got a lot of pages turned down from my favourites here, but I thought I would just read one of the shorter ones out to you because some of my favourites were like pages and pages long. So this one is called Antidote to the Fear of Death, and it's by a poet called Rebecca Elson. Sometimes as an antidote to the fear of death, I eat the stars. Those nights, lying on my back, I suck them from the quenching dark till they are all inside me, pepper hot and sharp. Sometimes, instead, I stir myself into a universe still young, still warm as blood. No outer space, just space. The light of all the not yet stars drifting like a bright mist in all of us, and everything already there but unconstrained by form. And sometimes it's enough to lie down here on earth beside our long ancestral bones, to walk across the cobble fields of our discarded skulls, each like a treasure, like a chrysalis, thinking, whatever left these husks flew off on bright wings. I just thought that was absolutely beautiful, like, oh, I love the imagery in that of the stars and space and bones in fields, and I just thought it was absolutely beautiful. And one of my resolutions for this year is actually to read more poetry, so if anyone has any recommendations of poets who write in that kind of style, please let me know because I just need to read more stuff like this. The next book is one which I have talked about before in my Scottish books video, and that is The Panopticon by Jenny Fagan. This one tells the story of a girl called Anais who has been accused of assaulting a police officer and has been taken into like a young offenders institute, which is this circular building where there's a tower in the middle and the guards can see everything from this tower, so it's known as the panopticon, like seeing all. Just the imagery she uses, and there's lots of hints of magical realism, like the gargoyles like guarding this prison, like Anais believes that they come alive, and there's all that kind of stuff. And on top of that, Anais is just such a likeable protagonist. Like, she's got a lot of flaws and a lot of the time you're like, oh, what is she doing? But I think that makes her more likeable. She's so realistic. And I also like the way that this book played with gender and sexuality, and it's just, yeah, it's just stunning. I would highly recommend this if you're looking for quite a gritty but sort of, I don't know, it's got kind of dark glamour about it in a really kind of twisted way. I would highly recommend this one. Next, another one that I have mentioned before, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, and that is Girls Will Be Girls, Dressing Up, Playing Parts and Daring to Act Differently by Emer O'Toole. And this is just amazing. It deals with so many gender issues and what gender actually means. It's non-fiction, I should probably point out, unless you figured that out already. I would say, even as a staunch feminist and somebody who went in knowing a lot about gender and how it's constructed and everything already, I still got a lot from this book. So I would say this is suitable for all levels of expertise, whether you're sort of new to this notion, you're not quite clued up on it yet, or whether you feel that you're quite an expert in gender issues. This is just an excellent book, and you're bound to find out something new and interesting regardless of where you're coming from. I feel like I'm talking a lot about books here that I've already mentioned in other videos, because next up we have The Rental Heart and Other Fairy Tales by Christie Logan, which I have talked about endlessly because I'm just a massive fan of Christie's. This is a really good short story collection. It is the winner of the Scott Prize, and it also won the Polari Prize recently as well. So it deals a lot with, again, sexuality issues. Christie Logan plays with gender and sexuality, and it's very magical realist. Like, one of the stories is about coin operated boys who, like, women can hire to have as their boyfriends, and the main story, The Rental Heart, is you can rent a heart from a heart rental place, and if it gets broken you can just take it back in exchange for a new one. And there's, you know, boys and girls with deformities like tiger tails and deer antlers, and on top of all this it also has a lot of sort of Scottish folklore and mythology sort of surrounding the islands and things like that. I would recommend this one if you're looking for a good place to start with maybe Scottish folklore, magical realism, but you want to have it in small chunks. I think a short story collection like this is a really good starting point. Hooray, we have more books that I've been talking about already, because next is Beauty Tips for Girls by Margaret Montgomery. And this one is very feminist as well, which seems to be a recurring theme throughout all my books, for good reason, I guess. And this one is, again, it's a Scottish author, it's set in Scotland, and it is about a teenage girl, her alcoholic mother, and the girl's English teacher, and how they are expected to fulfil different roles within their lives and how their lives overlap. And it's told in a really interesting way. Some of it is just straight prose, and then it's got like magazine articles, because the main character, Katie, the young girl, is obsessed with this magazine and it kind of controls her life, which I think is a thing that a lot of young girls can relate to nowadays. So it's got all these kind of articles that the content of some of them is quite shocking. You know, she's what, 14, 15, and it goes on about sex positions and everything, and it really makes you balk, because you're like, wow, that's what these young girls are actually being subject to. And I think when you're that age and you're reading it for yourself, you don't necessarily question it. But then when you look back and you read it in this form and you realise that girls of that age are so vulnerable, it actually kind of shocks you a little bit. I thought this was a really good comment on women's gender roles today. Another one that I really enjoyed that I read at the start of last year is Hyperbole and a Half by Ali Brosh, which is based on her popular blog, which I followed for a long time before I finally invested in this book after about a year and a half of eyeing it up in the shops. And I'm really glad I did. I devoured it in a day because it's really simple comic strips. Like, you can just sit down and say, I'll just read this one strip, and then you read it and you're like, actually that didn't take too long, I'll just read the next one as well. So I ended up just reading the whole book in an afternoon because that kept happening. And I thought it was really sweet, it's really funny, it's got great commentary on mental health, and it's just all round a great book. If you don't want to invest in the book, then definitely go and check out her blog, because the content is much the same and it's just hilarious and heartwarming and brilliant. A few of my favourite books I don't actually have with me because I borrowed them from places like the library or friends, but the first one that I'm going to mention is The Humans by Matt Haig, which was absolutely amazing. I don't know what else I can say about it. I was kind of hesitant to pick it up, like it wasn't on my TBR list, but then I saw it in the library and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to give it a go. And I'm glad I did, because it absolutely blew my mind. It made me feel human, does that make sense? It just made me want to be a better person and made me realise that humans are weird, but you know, we've still got to just love each other and accept our flaws. And I thought, that was really nice. Another one by Matt Haig that's also in my top books of the list is Reasons to Stay Alive, which is one that my lecturer lent me because she knew that I was going through a tough time, and she was like, I'm reading this book, it's really, really beautiful and I think you would enjoy it. And I read it in maybe a week, 2 weeks or something. You don't even need to be suffering from like depression or anything to get something out of this book, because it's just so beautiful, and it's not just an autobiography of Matt Haig saying, I went through this, and this is how I came out of it. It's just interspersed with really nice quotes and lists and all that kind of nice stuff. Like, if you've ever seen that quote that's sort of floating around on Facebook but is often uncredited, that's got like, it says self-care, and then the quote is something like, how to stop time, kiss, how to feel time, breathe, how to travel in time, read. I think I made part of that up, but it's basically a quote along those lines. I can't remember exactly, but that is actually from Matt Haig's book, even though it's often uncredited. So I would say if you looked at that quote and you were like, oh, that's really nice, I would recommend that you go and check out the book as a whole, because it's all that amazing and it's so moving. Couple more books that are on my top list I'm going to kind of lump together because I read them around the same time and they had a similar effect on me, and that is Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit by Jeanette Winterson and Tipping the Velvet by Sarah Waters, both of which I read near the start of the year when I was finally coming to terms with my bisexuality, and they were just really, really helpful in getting me through that time. Oranges moved me more, but Tipping the Velvet was more of an exciting book. It was more of an adventure. And despite the fact that it's historical fiction, and I usually don't read historical fiction, I don't really have much interest in it, I thought it was absolutely amazing because it's less like a book about the Victorian era and more the Victorian era is there as a backdrop, and all the action focuses on this young woman, Nan, and her adventures through London, and you're just constantly rooting for her and wondering what's going to happen next, and there's so many twists and turns that you kind of forget that it's historical fiction. It's just really, really exciting and you grow to love the characters. So if anyone has any recommendations of books like historical fiction in that vein, please let me know, because I really, really enjoyed it for that reason, and I'm going to check out some more of Sarah Waters' work. I would also really recommend the stage show if you ever get a chance to see it. It was on at the Lyceum in Edinburgh a couple of months ago, and I think it's finished for now, but it's no doubt going to appear somewhere else sooner or later. It was so brilliant. It was really, really funny, whereas the book could be quite heartbreaking in places. The show was just hilarious. Like, it had everything. It had circus, it had acrobatics, it had beautiful costumes and set design, it had music, had cabaret, it had like a live narrator like commenting on the action, like providing comedy, and it was just fantastic. So if it ever moves on and you get the chance to see it, I would highly recommend that. I actually forgot another one of my top books before I moved on to the ones that I don't have with me, and that is The Bloody Chamber and Other Stories by Angela Carter. Now, this is the first Angela Carter that I've read, and I think it was a really good starting point because I've always loved fairy tales and I just really, really loved the darkness of these ones. I loved the dark twists. I think my favourite was possibly the title story itself, The Bloody Chamber, because it was so different. Like, I feel like a lot of fairy tales have been retold a lot and they've kind of been done to the death, whereas I hadn't read a retelling of Bluebeard before, so The Bloody Chamber was a really nice surprise for me, I guess. I'm really looking forward to reading more Angela Carter soon. Finally, we have a book that is not in the greatest condition because it came to Africa with me, and that is Northern Lights by Philip Pullman. Yay! I wouldn't say that it was necessarily my favourite in itself per se, but the fact that I'm now reading the rest of the series, and although we're only 6 days into the new year, I can already tell that The Subtle Knife is going to be one of my top reads of this year. Like, I absolutely adored The Subtle Knife, and obviously I never would have read it had I not read Northern Lights first. It's just mind-blowing. I don't know where this series has been my whole life, and as you can see, it's been through the wars. I took it to the beach and I put my towel on top of it and it's all kind of water weathered now, but it has character. So part of me wants to replace it so that it looks nice and shiny with the rest of the series, but at the same time I feel like this book has memories now. Like, this is Gambian water in this book. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what your top reads of the year were, whether you'd recommend them to me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!